Great, okay. And
good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome. It's so good to see you tonight. It's a cold, chilly night, but the church is warm because of your warm hearts that are gathered us together. So, I know quite a few people told me this Sunday they're going to watch it online because they felt it was it just too dark and too cold to come out. But thank you for doing this. We're so excited that this is happening, especially in communion with the American Martyrs Church, where Father Steve is tonight, and will be here tomorrow night, as you know. So thank you for coming. However you feel about the election, this is a good reflection to take us back to the gospel, take us back to the heart of being in communion with one another. So this is a really poignant time to do this, and an important time to do this. So thank you for coming. I don't really need to give a big introduction to Tom. You know Father Tom Gibbons, the Vice President of Paulist Productions, and former one of the pastors here, associate pastors here, previously to that. But the Paulist Initiative on Polarization, with the board that you and our presidential board created, it's been an amazing experience. If you haven't talked to the people who went to the conference, there's so much that they've shared with us, and I hope we can kind of keep that alive. I suspect in the next few years we'll have to be attentive to how we are with one another, and maybe in a special way. So that's all the introduction I really wanted to offer. You know Tom, and welcome Tom, and thanks for doing this for us.
okay, well, I just may have to talk And I never do that. Wait a minute. Did you see an elephant go up there? There we go. Okay. Yay! Well, dealing with Thanksgiving tensions. Hi, my name is Father Tom Gibbons. Thank you so much, Father Gill, for that warm introduction. And I'm really so glad that everybody could make it out here tonight. So it's been a couple of weeks since the really divisive event that has kind of really kind of helped, it's really kind of separated people and made people feel left out and behind. The Yankees losing the World Series was an event so many of us are still trying to get over. Oh wait, okay, no, this might not be the right crowd for that, you know. But as Father Gill was talking about before, the Paulist Fathers and their 2022 General Assembly, one of the things we do in anticipation of the 2020, whenever we do a General Assembly, which happens every 4 years, is we listen to people in the community, we listen to our partners, and we listen to say, hey, what are the things that are going on in this world? What are the things that we need to talk about? What are the things we need to lift up? And political polarization really rose up from those with whom we were speaking in terms of the divisiveness over politics and just how, we had kind of gone before a certain disagreement on politics and where politics became less about a difference of opinion and started becoming more personal and more tribal. And so we had this great gathering in, of all places, Las Vegas in this past April. And one of the reasons why we chose Las Vegas is because Nevada is typically a swing state. So it's kind of has that both blue and red, and we brought people together from all over in different parts of the spectrum to kind of just like talk about these dynamics and not talk about who's right and who's wrong, but just it's not to talk about not so much what do people or we disagree on, but how do we go about disagreeing? How do we go about in a way that's consistent with our faith? And so, and there was such a great response. I know Claire was there. Who else was there? Was anybody there? Yep, Lisa, of course, Lisa there. Yep, and Lou. People who were there, we had such a great response. We were like, how are we going to bring this forward? How are we going to bring this conversation? Because it's one of those conversations that as soon as we start talking about it, so many people start telling about stories, and everybody has like a different experience with it. But as we were saying, and this is in large part one of the talks that I gave at the Las Vegas Summit, but we needed a theme, and we're talking about what's the theme, and you're like, well, if we do this in the middle of November, A, it will be after the election, but B, it will be before Thanksgiving, which is usually, Thanksgiving dinner is the time when so many, not everybody's family, I'm sure the Kennedys all agree on everything, the Reagans may all agree on it. Well, no, not the Reagans. No, we know that's not true. The Bushes may all agree on everything. But where, a lot of times this awkwardness comes up in this. So we figured this would be a good opportunity for us to reflect on that. And I think I'm going to kind of give like an overview and kind of give a reflection on some of the dynamics at play based on research. And then then Father Steve's going to come back and talk more about how do we kind of navigate things in the more practical sense. So he will be less dependent on audio visuals than I was. And I had to do a little rush editing this morning because I'm not sure if anybody had seen, it came out a couple of years ago, there's a great Saturday Night Live skit that because we're streaming this, I can't show because of legal reasons. but it was everyone's coming together for Thanksgiving dinner, and they start arguing with one another over all these different political issues. And the only thing that unites them is when the little girl goes to the jukebox and plays Adele's Hello. And then everyone just starts singing Hello. It was the only thing they could agree on. So it was just, that was the skit. So, but what not, I did a quick search on Google, what not to talk about at Thanksgiving dinner. What do you not talk about? It's not good to talk about religion. We don't want to make other people feel awkward that we're right and they're wrong. No, I'm just kidding. It's joke. I'm joking. Everybody in streaming land, that's a joke. Parenting advice. Don't give parenting advice at Thanksgiving dinner. Finances. That's a tough topic at Thanksgiving. Relationships. This is all from Google, by the way, so that's my thing. And of course, politics. Now, one of the reasons we got, I know I kind of started on this journey of looking at political polarization is as Father Gill mentioned, I've been working for Paulist Productions for roughly 8 years, and we've been indulging in we've been looking into a lot of different programs, or a lot of different media projects to which we can enter, and then in 2020 we had this big event happen. It happened in the midst of COVID, and the death of George Floyd really set off this brand new discussion, or renewed discussion, on race in America. And I remember, and then as a result, many on the East Coast and in the South, many Confederate statues started to be torn down. And I was thinking, we're having this big discussion on race in America, and it was the middle of COVID. We were working on Hollywood Priest, the story about Father Bud Kaiser. And I was wondering, what's the Catholic angle to this? What's the Catholic story? We have a lot to say about this. And then the statues of Junipero Serra started coming down, and that whole controversy started coming up, and his statues coming down, and I was just like, aha, that's the Catholic angle. And what I am from the great state of New Jersey, so when I saw statues of Confederate statues coming down, I knew what that meant. I was like, okay, I can understand what's going on there. But as an East Coaster, I had no idea. I'm like, who is Junipero Serra? Like, I'd heard a little bit around his canonization, that there was some controversy and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, this is something, but what I noticed, what seemed to be going on was there were I don't want to say half, but there was a number of people who were saying that Junipero Serra was and is a saint. And I was thinking, oh yeah, they're correct. And then there was a group of people who were saying, but Junipero Serra was a colonizer. And I remember thinking, they're correct too. And what we were thinking was, wait a minute. Here is a debate in which two people, or two opinions or sides, have a very valid point of view. And at least from the surface, I saw everybody just going off into their usual corners. It was kind of like, we need to talk. It was like those who were really in the Catholic camp, it's like, we need to defend Father Serra's name from everybody. And then those who might be in a more like social justice camp were like, no, we need to rip this down. We need to, and it just felt like a lot of the conversations were not connecting. And so we started on this journey of working on this film that will likely be called Statute of Limitations, Father Serra and the California Natives. I have to put in a little poster because I work in Hollywood, so I always have to do a little plug. We're hoping to have that out. Every time I say it's going to be in a few months, it always gets kicked back. But we are going to have it out before 2025 ends, I swear. I mean it this time. It's coming out. But along the process, we were able to interview someone, or we were able to talk to someone named Arthur Brooks. How many people are familiar with Arthur Brooks? Many people who might read The Atlantic. He's a writer for Atlantic, and he's got he wrote a book a couple of years ago with Oprah Winfrey, but about how to be happy, and because it was about how to be happy and it was Oprah Winfrey, it became a New York Times bestseller. Before that, though, he wrote a book called Love Your Enemies, and it's how decent people can save America from the culture of contempt. And he wrote this, I think, in 2017, and he saw many of the same dynamics of how are we talking to and with one another, and how are we talking about those and with those with whom we disagree. And he brought up that we currently have this culture of contempt. So fortunately, we were able to do an interview as part of our documentary. So we're going to have a couple of the clips from that to show. Hopefully it comes off okay for everybody in internet land. But here we're going to have like a couple of internet clips just so as he kind of unpacks what's going on. And so we're kind of, and I think we've kind of seen this, we've seen the protest, and there's always been time of protest. There's always been time of disagreement. But one of the things that we're seeing now is we are seeing, we're seeing like families are not getting together for Thanksgiving dinner. Like people have cut off friends. People are doing things. Things have reached such a high level that there's been this separation of us versus them, that many people have started saying that, or at least started asking the question, are we in a soft civil war now between right and left? And so the question is, why are we here? And so is one of the reasons because we tend to spend time with people who have more and more people are spending more time with people who share their own viewpoints and don't disagree with them. And I've also noticed that a lot of this rejection is taking place because we feel we're upset at others who, through their behaviors, through their votes, through their stances, reject the values that we care about. So sometimes I will notice that, like I've noticed for maybe people who are more traditional, will say to those who are less traditional, hey, when you reject church, when you reject XYZ, you're rejecting the values I care about. These are the things that are fundamental. So I have to put you over there. I have to fight against you because you are rejecting the values that I care about. However, on the left, people who see the consequences of things like immigration, LGBTQ, all those, they will look at the other side and say, I have to reject you because you are rejecting the people that I care about. You are rejecting those I care about, those who are marginalized. And so it becomes like this cyclical reasoning for why we can reject one another. I think another reason, and I've heard this on different sides from people who might be more labeled more progressive or more traditional, is they've had bad experiences with people from the other side. I've talked to someone who might be a little bit more conservative, and we're like, man, I was in this group of liberals and they were just trashing me and they said something bad, and I just don't want to be like any of those people. And then I'll see someone who's more liberal and I'll be like, God, I grew up in this really conservative town and they made me feel like bad. I have to watch my language because we're streaming, and so I can't stand those people over there because of how they singled me out, how they made me feel. So that's where I'm going to draw that divide. A lot of times, it's because of our identity. We'll kind of look at our own political opinion, our own disposition, as our own identity. And so to disagree with an aspect of one of this stances means you're disagreeing with me as a person, and I have to hold on to my identity at all costs. Of course, insecurity too. Let's face it. I know when I get my back up against the wall, you know, if I'm feeling like I really want to yell and slam my fist on the table, I'm usually feeling more insecure than I'm feeling strong. I'm usually feeling more insecure than I'm feeling strong. Are there any other reasons in your lives, or that you can see, why we're kind of in this place? Does anyone have any thoughts that they want to yell out? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Right. I'm going to repeat that just because we're online. So what you were saying is a third. Okay, so you were hearing that a third of the public gets their news from influencers who are already carrying a certain disposition. Now, did you hear that from an influencer? No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry, you were going to say something. Yeah. Yeah. Males, okay, all right, okay, so males and youth, yep, okay. Did someone else have something else to say? Yes, ma'am. Post-truthness, right, okay. Okay. Not sharing. And I think that might have something to do with what you're saying, where if we're living in different internet spheres, where we're being pushed certain information that predisposes to our own bias. You know, like if I'm one thing, I like MSNBC because MSNBC is always going to reaffirm my worldview. If I'm another, I'm going to watch Fox News because Fox News is always going to reaffirm my worldview. And typically in those situations, the media that we consume often will throw up somebody from the other side, whichever side that is, as a straw man. As a side that they can then beat down. Like I've seen this on both networks, where there'll be like a panel. If it's Fox, there'll be a panel of 5 people. One of them's a liberal, and it's the job of the other 4 conservatives to beat up that. And then of course, MSNBC will do something very, very similar. There'll be 4 liberals, and then there's like, well, you know, I'm a conservative and I believe this. You know, it's kind of we kind of see that dynamic as a way, and I think it's because that's a lot of our diets, our information diets nowadays. I think that also contributes to the, was it Stephen Colbert, way before he got his own late night show, but when he called it truthiness, you know. Everybody has their own truthiness to kind of support our own dispositions. And so, over time, what's gone on is Pew Research has been looking at the American populace and looking at an ideological scale. And of those who are politically engaged, we look at that center line right there. What's like the distance between each means? And it's kind of close, you know. Okay, some people are center left, some people are center right. We've got this like amount of divide. So that's 1994. 1999, it's looking kind of similar. 2004, okay, it's about the same. In 2011, it starts to broaden. In 2015, look at how big that line is between the two. What is significant about 2011? Why is that? What happens around that time in our culture, in our lives? Wait, what am I hearing? Was there anything that came on the scene that yes, John? Black president. Okay, that's not exactly what I was thinking, but okay. Was there anything else? Yes, sir. Facebook, yes. I was going to do this and me reading a book as kind of a clue, but yes, Facebook. Social media. Social media, where we connect with people whom we care about and people who are like-minded. And people who are, and through that, we start to see the, and those are amongst those who are politically engaged. And in the general population, we see something very similar as well. It gets wider and wider and wider. And so, polarization in the world, according to 2023 Edelman Trust Barometer, talks about what are the two axes for political polarization. And on the, I think it's the y-axis, we see how many people feel my country is very extremely divided. And then on the x-axis, I do not feel these divides can be overcome. And so you have all these different countries in here who are kind of all, this is probably, the middle area is probably the healthy area, because we need robust debate. We need people to disagree. We need people to come around. But then we start getting into the upper ranges, where Colombia, South Africa, Spain, or Sweden are, where the divides are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So, where is the United States? Here is the United States on that level. Do you suppose there's one other country that's on this list that is even higher than that, and that is Argentina. Do we know anybody as Catholics from Argentina? The Pope, yes, good answer, yes. Whoop, I'm sorry, I'm gonna go back for a second. So anyway, I mislabeled my slides, so give me a second. But here are the quotes about what the effects are from this polarization. And these were quotes of people who were coming to the Vegas seminar in April. It is heartbreaking that families and friends are being torn apart due to an increasing intolerance with different views and a constant spread of misinformation. When we should be uniting to evangelize the culture, it seems we are often more preoccupied with focusing on what divides us as Catholics. It can be challenging to engage honestly in some conversations for fear that one will be typecast or canceled for holding a particular opinion. Okay, so to go back to my other point, Pope Francis, the Argentinian, and he started talking about this concern about polarization, particularly in Fratelli Tutti in 2020. Life, for all of its confrontations, is the art of the encounter. Differences can coexist, complementing, enriching, and reciprocally illuminating one another, even amid disagreements and reservations. Each of us can learn something from others. No one is useless, and no one is expendable. Except for Aaron Judge in the fifth inning. That's a difference. I'm sorry. I was letting my polarizing tendencies get through. Just kidding, Aaron. You'll be back. Polarization, and then Pope Francis also went on to talk about this in America magazine. Polarization is not Catholic. A Catholic cannot think either or and reduce everything to polarization. The essence of what is Catholic is both and. The Catholic unites the good and the not so good. There is only one people of God. When there is polarization, a divisive mentality arises, which privileges some and leaves others behind. And so Arthur Brooks talks about motive attribution asymmetry, which is a very human quality so many of us have. It's whenever we're faced with a conflict, it's that maybe that reptile part of our brain in the back stem that tends to say, I'm a good person and they're a bad person. I love and they hate.
Some people say that the solution is civility or tolerance. Well, I said that's nonsense. If I told you that my wife and I were civil to each other, you'd say, whoa, you need a marriage counselor. And that's not good. Or that my employees, they tolerate me. Say I have an HR problem. There's a phenomenon in my field as a social scientist called motive attribution symmetry. And it's a pretty simple idea, but this is what we academics do. We take a simple idea and put fancy words on it and we obtain it. And motive attribution symmetry classifies this. What does it mean? It means you have an irreconcilable conflict between two parties. This can't come together. It can go for years and years at a time. But it's based on an error. And the error is that both sides usually agree, I love what they hate. So I love something which is good and true and pure. And they hate that thing. That's the basis of the conflict. Now that's true when we look at the Palestinian-Israeli conflict or the genocide in Rwanda or the Balkan conflicts that have gone on for hundreds and hundreds of years. Or for that matter, a couple that's getting divorced. Inevitably, people say, look, I love her, but she needs me. She treats me with hatred. And I still love what I always loved. But he hates, and he treats me with hatred. And with his disrespect, with his contempt. And that motive attribution symmetry is an error because in any conflict, you can't have both sides simultaneously loving and hating. One side is loving, usually both. And we can't find a solution unless we treat each other with respect. We can't find a solution unless we treat each other with contempt. Contempt is the conviction of the worthlessness of another person. That's the nuclear option when it comes to actually adjudicating a dispute. It means I win, you lose. It's done. And that's just not the solution that we're talking about. Anybody who says in the statutes debate that it's going to be one side completely winning and the other side completely losing is actually not going to help us make progress in this, such that we can all live together with more harmony in the future.
And he talks about that culture of contempt. Social scientists define contempt as anger mixed with disgust. So it's not just I'm angry at you, it's like, ugh. You know. These two emotions form a toxic combination like ammonia mixed with bleach. In the words of the 19th century philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, thank you. Schopenhauer. Contempt is the unsullied conviction of the worthlessness of another. So and by engaging a culture of contempt, it's one of the things that and many researchers will say, if a marriage counselor is dealing with a couple, is working with a couple, and they're angry with one another, then the relationship can be healed. However, if the couple is talking about one another with contempt, it's likely that the marriage is over. See the difference? Angry is you bought the wrong kind of toilet paper, and let's get on the same page about that, or the same roll about that, whatever that is. Contempt is when this other person, I do not see the worth in this other person anymore. And that's when the marriages go down. Now, of course, in our own Christian Catholic tradition, we have the ultimate troll, St. Paul. St. Paul, as we all know, was originally named Saul. He was a figure who, sadly, would not be unfamiliar in our age, a militant ideologue who believed he was doing God's will through violence. God forbid Saul had Twitter. Oh my God. When the people, the elders, and the scribes heard this, they were infuriated and they ground their teeth at Stephen. They cried out in a loud voice, covered their ears, and rushed upon him together. They threw him out of the city and began to stone Stephen. The witnesses laid down their cloaks at the feet of a young man named Saul. Now Saul was consenting to his execution. Acts 7:51 to 58. Oh, I'm sorry, 7:51 to 8:1a. I was kind of getting that mixed up. We also know in the Christian existence, in the early Christian existence, that disagreement is part of the human existence and it is part of our Christian existence. The Council of Jerusalem was a very heated discussion between Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians over circumcision. That is a very personal discussion to some of us in this room. The big question was, Paul is going out and he's bringing in all these Gentiles, all these male Gentiles, all these adult male Gentiles. And the big question is, do you need to be Jewish to be a follower of Jesus? Because if you're a male and you become Jewish, there are some discomforting elements in the process of becoming Jewish. We'll just put it that way. Some who had come down from Judea were instructing the brothers, unless you are circumcised according to the Mosaic practice, you cannot be saved. Because there arose no little dissension and debate by Paul and Barnabas with them. It was decided that Paul, Barnabas, and some of the others should go up to Jerusalem to the apostles and the presbyters about this question. How many here are familiar with the Vatican II Council? I assume most of you. All right, that was the most recent council. The Council of Jerusalem, this question was the first council. And yet, in the midst of our disagreements, a growing number of studies suggest that only 10 to 20% of Americans hold extreme or polar positions in civic and religious issues. The 10 to 20 extreme may include many civic, media, and religious leaders and institutions who perpetuate the flames of toxic polarization by oversimplifying conflict. And I think that's what we were talking about earlier, about like, where do we get our information and what are the manner of those who are communicating that information to us. Sharper positions, polls, attract more attention than moderation. I mean, if you turn on the news and everyone's just going, yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I agree. You're not going to sell as many bran flakes, unfortunately. In other words, the majority of people believe that Miller Lite both tastes great and is less filling. The actual positions versus perceived positions of the other side. Here are the perceived immigration positions. If one is a Republican, they tend to think that all Democrats, they tend to think that the other side holds way more extreme positions than the other person does. So, this is a weird thing. I'm trying to figure out. I think I understand what it's trying to say, but Republicans tend to think that Democrats want completely open borders. Democrats tend to think that Republicans want completely closed borders. And the arguments go forth from that position. When the actual immigration positions are all over the place, and there's quite a bit of overlap. Monica Guzman wrote a really good book called I Never Thought of It That Way. And she talked about this dynamic in terms of how to kind of fearlessly go into that breach, how to go into that breach where people are kind of, it appears that everybody is divided, but they're not as divided as they think they are. And she was like talking about the struggle that she was having with her parents. Many people, the young parents, it's like parents tend to be more traditional than the younger person, so it's like there's this humongous divide. So anyway, she starts talking about how do we see different people around us more clearly? We see people first by putting a check on 3 patterns that make us turn away from anyone who's different from us, even when we don't mean to. 3 patterns that go on in the back of our head, or sometimes even in the front of our head, that lead us to kind of put somebody else into a different column from us. Split into steps, the patterns go like this. Sorting. We get together into groups. Now, we all kind of do this. Sometimes all the Catholics will get together, all the Jewish people will get together, sometimes we'll do this. We might sort into politics, we might do this or that. Othering. It's one thing for us to kind of go into a group where we feel similar or what have you. It's another thing when we push others into groups that seem to oppose us. I'm over here, but those people over there, I have to push them over there. And then siloing. We sink deeper into our groups and our stories where it's harder to hear anything else. So we're in our group, they're in our group, and now we have to build up walls so we don't understand what's going over there because it risks challenging our own narratives. For sorting is about who we like to be around. There's no mystery to this. We like to be around people who are like us, people who share things in common with us, people who make us smile, keep us comfortable, and aren't going to make us mad or nervous. When we other, however, othering is about the people whom we do not like to be around. These folks are opposed to us in some way. They annoy us, or stand against us, or disagree on something that matters. We push off from them, and the distance feels good and right. We can get some sort of gratification by saying, I'm not one of those people. And then siloing is about the things we say and hear, how we explain our worlds to each other, the signals that reach us and the signals that don't reach us, and how we sink over time into a hole where our own attitudes are reinforced instead of being challenged, particularly about what those other people think. Now, I don't get into this too much here, but I think one of the great graces we have of being part of a church community is there's fewer and fewer spaces in our modern life when we are exposed to different kinds of people, particularly within our Catholic community. Catholic means universal, means everybody's welcome, for better or for worse. Here comes everybody. And it also means that we get exposed to people who have different positions, different ideas, different thoughts. And we have fewer and fewer and fewer of those opportunities left. The more time people spend online, the more easily it is to be siloed, but the more we spend time in these third spaces, so to speak, whether it's church, whether it's an Elks Club, whether it's a bowling league, whatever, we have the opportunity to break those silos. And in addition to breaking those silos, there's also the work of bridging. How do we bridge against the divides? And then Arthur talks about this a little bit more.
In any community, there are ties between people that link us together. They're not explicit necessarily. They're more implicit. We know we're part of a community. We go to the same church, we're part of the same neighborhood, we go to the same bowling league, whatever it happens to be. And there's two kinds of these ties in society. There's what we call bonds and what we call bridges. Now, the bonds are what we have in common. I'm from this university, so are you. It's a bond. We have that in common. I'm this age, so are you. I'm a Catholic, so are you. These are bonds, and bonds are great. But what the real magic in a community comes when we start paying attention to bridges. The bridges are the ties that we have, notwithstanding the differences that are between us. And so, bridging between people is, I'm going to find love with another person across big differences, old and young, black and white, immigrants and native born. He's the kinds of things we can say, we have common loves, but we're very different people. And that kind of bridging, that's the difference between a community can come together and one that can.
Now, of course, one of the great things about being here at St. Paul's is one of our mottos has been, it's on the banners outside, wherever you are in your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. And I think I constantly hear that. I've been hearing that ever since I arrived here. And that's real bridging material. That is like a real bridging attitude. And I think that's a great example of what we try to do. And even the USCCB, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, are concerned about this concept of polarization. So they came out with a a movement called Civilize It, a better kind of politics. And it's a response to Pope Francis's invitation to seek a better kind of politics, one that is truly at the service of the common good. And so it's an opportunity to take the pledge of charity, clarity, and communication, and commit to seeking the truth, building bridges, and finding solutions together that promote the common good. Individuals and families can participate. And so we're all going to say this together. Good, it's still on the firm. And so it's a pledge we can all take in however way we can. So I pledge for charity, so I'll say it together, for charity, to affirm through my words and actions the dignity of every person, each made in God's image, even those with whom I disagree and are made in his image. No matter how wrong they are. No, I'm just kidding. That part isn't on there, sorry. And then the second part, to respectfully listen in order to understand experiences different from my own. Clarity, to engage in critical examination to ensure that my to engage in critical examination. To ensure that my perspectives are rooted in truth. That my sources of information are unbiased. And that I do not open myself to manipulation by partisan interests. To form my conscience through prayerful reflection, study of Scripture and church teaching, and guidance from reputable experts, to reflect on my own values and seek with others to identify shared values. To be open to the process of dialogue that can require change of perspective, and service to the inviolable dignity of all and the common good. Creativity, to be a bridge builder who participates in constructive dialogue, based on shared values, a mutual exchange of gifts, and the humility to seek the good. To see differences in perspective as opportunities for creative tension. Which can yield solutions for the common good. To work with others in order to identify creative solutions rooted in our shared values. Okay, we're going to take a quick intermission. So we'll come back in about 5 minutes. And then Claire's going to hand out some papers, so feel free to mix amongst yourselves. So just take a quick stretch.
Don't worry, just...
Okay, I think we're ready to get back. Okay. We'll start off again by going back to Fratelli Tutti, which Pope Francis says, public discussion, if it truly makes room for everyone and does not manipulate or conceal information, is a constant stimulus to a better grasp of the truth. Let us not forget that differences are creative. They create tension, and in the resolution of tension lies humanity's progress. And so, the second half is going to be gleaned from an organization that I've started getting a little bit involved with, and many Paulists have been getting involved with, called Braver Angels. And it's a group that was started by a marriage therapist when he started seeing the divides, the political divides that were happening with many of the couples he was counseling, many of the family divides that were happening, and said, you know what, this is not good. So I'm going to do a little video that talks about it. I also worked on the audio a little bit, so hopefully I heard some of you were having problems hearing in the back, so hopefully you can hear a little bit better.
Politics has always been a passionate subject, and we've always had deep political disagreements. That's the way it's supposed to be. But we've gotten to the point where people can't even talk to one another. Americans no longer see their political opponents as simply wrong or misguided. They see them as bad people whose ways of thinking are dangerous and incomprehensible. They see them as enemies. This level of rancor and mistrust threatens our democracy, and it makes it harder for us to move forward as a nation, regardless of who the president is. The fact that we live in what feels like some people call it a cold civil war, that takes a toll on all of us.
We've been excommunicated from a lot of our friends in the last couple of years, and it makes me sad.
This is an organization that's doing a lot of time to overcome that and get back to where we're just neighbors, friends, communities.
We are truly bipartisan. From our staff to our funding to our board of directors, we're evenly split, half conservative and half liberal. Everything we do comes from the bottom up. We're an almost entirely volunteer-led operation. We wanted to see, can we get together a group of folks who voted for Trump and a group of folks who voted for Clinton and get them in a room together to see how can we bring people together to not get them to agree or to come to the middle, but to maybe change how they think about one another.
When you were there in person, did you face the person you talked to? You remember something that was just a discourse and then how much that in society? It's something that really distinguishes this from the conversation debate.
It's all on the responsibility of the next people, but the missing ingredient is courage. The courage that it takes to have a difficult conversation, to put yourself out there. Well, the saying is that this year, it's not enough to call on our angels. We have to call on our braver angels.
The name Braver Angels captures the evolving spirit of better angels. We have to be willing to summon the courage to see the best in the other side, see the best in our fellow Americans.
Courage means becoming a leader in your own community who's standing up for America, not just for your political party or your tribe or folks with whom you share an identity, but standing up for something larger that we can all believe in. If we can create a large enough movement that is clamoring for a more courageous style of politics,
And so as we kind of start, this one is a little bit more workshop-y, this part. And so we're going to start off with the biggest obstacle to depolarization, the biggest obstacle to kind of lowering the temperature. And the biggest obstacle is you. You are the biggest obstacle. You, right there. Yeah, you think it's somebody else, but it's you. Yeah. I just want to say that in the second half, I'm particularly proud of the animations that I put in. I put in like a lot of extra, like let's watch that one again. I just love how the boom goes out. So anyway. Well, all of us. It's not just you, of course. It's really all of us and how we move forward. And so as we know in Scripture, why do you notice the splinter in your brother's eye, but do not perceive the wooden beam in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me remove that splinter from your eye? You hypocrite, remove the wooden beam from your eye first. Then you will see clearly to remove the splinter from your brother's eye. Or, as the great Los Angeles poet Ice Cube once said, you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. I thought that would get a bigger response. Maybe I need a little glowing animation after behind Ice Cube. All right. So our work today is going to be depolarizing within. What do we need to do? What are some of the habits we do, like to consciously or subconsciously engage in just kind of helping to lower the temperature? And the important thing to notice is no one is asking anybody to change their values per se. No one is asking anybody to, how do we convince, sometimes I'll joke, these are great skills to, if I can master these skills, I can show other people how wrong they are. No, this is a way for us to kind of like re-examine how can we be with one another? How can we be with one another? And so, of course, Dr. Seuss talks about this too. I'm afraid that sometimes you'll play lonely games too, games you can't win because you'll play against you. And so, depolarizing is more about how we regard and talk about large groups of other people on the other side of the aisle. How to be more aware of our own tendency to do either or and to push people off to the side. How to be critical. We're not saying don't be critical, because there's some things we need to be critical about. Amen? Amen? But without demonizing, dismissing, or stereotyping large swaths of the population. Strategies for intervening constructively in social conversations with like-minded peers when these conversations veer into contempt and ridicule. The ridicule part is really hard for me because I love when you get that really good smart alecky comment. When you got that, you're like, oh man, this belongs on the Daily Show. This is such a good one-liner. That's been one of my challenges. And so the question is, how do we view the other? How do we people with whom we disagree? So, if we view people with hatred, on the bad, they are enemies, we may look at someone we disagree with and say they want to harm our country. If we refer to people as deplorable, we disdain them. They're ignorant, but they should know better. Pity, they've been duped, they're well-meaning but fooled. Basic respect, they have something to contribute, some valid points, although their overall perspective is flawed. And then respect and appreciation, they have a lot to contribute. Important perspective, even if I only agree with parts of it. And this is, I think it's on, that is on your sheet. Yes, that's on the sheet. So it's kind of a way of kind of like, it's kind of like a good check. Like how do I really view, how am I referring to the other people on the other side? And so we're going to do a Recognizing My Inner Polarization workshop. So use the following questions to think about your own inner polarization. And then most of us think or feel some of these things. So I'm going to ask you to take like a few minutes, just like 2 minutes, I should have brought pens or pencils, and but you can just, there's only 6 questions, or, you know. But if you have a pen or a pencil, or you can just like make a little mark, if you could just like write down which of these do you find yourself in, you know, on each of those 6, where are those levels? And then, Claire, are there extra sheets, or are they all? And for those watching at home, you can do this. You can see it on your screen, and you can see how often do I find myself thinking about, quote, those people on the other political side? How often do I find myself assigning mainly self-serving or negative motives to the other group and positive motives to our own group? How often do I find myself focusing on the most extreme or outrageous ideas of people on the other side? How often do I find myself comparing the worst people on the other side with the best people on my side? How often do I feel a rush of pleasure with friends when we ridicule those crazies on the other political side? And which of the following is closest to my overall emotional attitude towards the majority of people who support the other side? Circle 1. Does anyone want to share what they've said or what they wrote on any of them? You can pick 1 or 2 or... Yep, right back there. Middle America, okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anybody else have any, or even just responses or reactions that you know, if you don't want to share anything? Yep. Yeah. Yep. Sure. Yeah. I'm just repeating so people on the thing can hear. So you missed having the old 3 network system, you know, in which, you know, the Walter Cronkites and such, you know, because our news has become in many ways very stratified and siloed. Yeah. And it's hard to know how to respond to events because of that. Did I get that right? Yeah. Okay. I know for number 6, when I did this, it was hard for me to, it says pick 1, and it was hard for me to pick 1. Because I think in certain cases, I'm in certain moods, you know. Of course, I pity people who can't be as correct as I am all the time. Of course, it's a joke. Okay, thank you, those of you who laughed at that. But I think, you know, different times, I'll kind of go through different things. You know, if an election doesn't come the way I want it to, I will, I never veer to hate, but disdain is a biggie for me. If I feel like things are going the wrong way, disdain. So I think I kind of alternate, I think depending on my mood or depending on how the world is going as I view how the world should be going, I probably alternate between disdain, I bounce between disdain and basic respect. You know, because sometimes I can say, oh, okay, I can see where that person from, and then another situation, I'm like, what the HE double hockey sticks is going on? Did anyone else want to share or have any? Yes, Smith. Okay, that's a good point. Yes. Well, I think that's a good, and we're going to get into that because I think that's a good separation, because I think a lot of times what may happen is that, yeah, I think you're right because, certain leaders may not represent everything that I stand for, even if I cast that support for that person or whatever. But I think that's a good point. It's how often do we kind of allow ourselves to get sucked into that? I think we're going to hit that in the next couple of slides, but that's a really important distinction. I really don't like that leader, but that doesn't mean everybody who voted supports that leader is in that place. Yep. Okay, so what you're saying is if you sense that the other person views a political situation differently, you clam up. Okay? Yep, okay. Yep. And then Barbara, I admit. Okay, all right. So in some ways you have a respect for the people you disdain because they should know better. Okay, all right. That's a good way of putting it. Okay. Yeah, Patty. That's okay. Okay. So that's kind of your way of responding. So what Patty was saying is I hear what you're saying. If she encounters someone with whom she disagrees, I hear what you're saying, and I don't agree with you, and just leaving it at that, right? And then, I'm sorry. Listen first. I left that out. Yes, I'm sorry. Listen first, and then kind of say where you're at, but then not go further with it. Yep. Yep. Okay. And then John. Correct. Just to kind of repeat what you're saying for the folks at home, it's easier to focus on the extremes than everybody else, like who may fall in the various gradations in the middle. Okay. All right. So we're gonna do some skills for. Oh, I'm sorry. Was there someone else I missed? Oh, I'm sorry, Tom. Yes. Oh, and I'll get to you next. Yeah, behavior over what you say. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yes. Yeah. No, and that's true. It's what's our behavior, but then also do we take who are we taking responsibility for our words? And I think that is an exceptional challenge, especially in this media environment in which the most shocking person tends to get rewarded with the most attention, and then I'm sorry, right there, ma'am. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's being perplexed at the extremism, at the extreme opinions that are being, and often those opinions are not being offered with any factual grounding. Am I communicating that right? Well, it's with that we're going to see what we can do just in our regular lives, if we come out here, to counterbalance this. So, this was the best. Some of the icons I was able to find were really good. The only one I could figure out was chess pieces to denote opposites. So, ways to offset polarizing thoughts and feelings when you notice them within you, if you might feel yourself being stirred up. One of the things is to edit the story you tell yourself about people on the other political side. And I think this is a crowd that I think for the most part really, I think we've always tried to kind of foster a broad acceptance. So in some ways, some of this stuff for a lot of us may even be review. But I think it's always good just to kind of say, it's like, I often say sometimes the best homilies are the ones I preach to myself, are the ones, how am I talking about people about whom I disagree and whatnot. And a lot of the times it's editing that story when I want to come up with a sweeping narrative. And part of that is to challenge our stereotypes. So blues tend to believe that reds are racist, anti-immigrant, uncaring about those in need, homophobic, anti-women, anti-science, and Bible thumpers. While reds tend to believe that blues are arrogant or elitist, favor big government for its own sake, and are fiscally irresponsible, unpatriotic, anti-religious, against free speech if it's not politically correct, and hypersensitive snowflakes. Ways to counter stereotypes in our own thinking. Tell ourselves, as many people have already been doing here today, skipping ahead from my slides and ruining my presentation, tell yourself that the other side is more varied than the stereotype, or maybe the loudest person in the room. Acknowledge that their political views and motivations are probably more complicated than the rhetoric we've been hearing. And read and listen to thought leaders on the other side who present complex arguments. And I think that's maybe a lot of what we need here is if we just kind of see the cartoon person from each side parroting something off, we're not likely to dive in and grow in wisdom and knowledge. We need to recognize that the life experiences informing different people's views are very likely different from our own. And part of that is developing relationships with people who differ with us politically. Relationships undermine stereotypes. And so, recently, and Claire went with me, and Tom, I'm sorry. Recently, Tim Bush from the Napa Institute reached out to the Paulist fathers when they saw that we were doing work in polarization, and the Paulists, better or for worse, sometimes were kind of tagged as being a more progressive group in the American Catholic Church. And Tim Bush is absolutely not pegged with being part of a more progressive group in the North American Church. But he saw that we were, and he started these salon dinners, and he started bringing people like James Martin, who's been a Catholic Jesuit priest, who's done a lot of work on the LGBTQ issue within the church, and kind of in many ways has a lot of polar opposites. Just looking from the inside. But they said, hey, we're both Catholic. We need to develop a relationship with one another, and so they started this thing called salon dinners. And at these salon dinners, it was, Tim would say, it's really impossible to hate somebody when you're having dinner with them. It's really impossible to hate someone when you're just sitting across the table and getting to know them. And so, it's in making those relationships, because when we have a relationship with someone, they stop becoming an issue and they start becoming a person, with complex experiences. And if we really want to go all out, we can develop an understanding of the history of the other side. So that's how to. And kind of going along with that, making depolarizing distinctions in which we distinction between positions and people. So someone is pro-life or someone is pro-choice, and we may disagree with that. We may disagree with the position, but not necessarily, but separate that position from certain people who hold that position. Distinguish between policies and core values. Because someone may hold a policy and think XYZ law might be a good idea or might not be a good idea, that doesn't mean that we have to trash somebody else's values. And also distinguish between inconsistency and hypocrisy. One of the first lessons anybody learns in any theology class is God is unlimited and humanity is limited. We all have our blind spots. There's lots of things that I believe that are contradictory. In many ways, we human beings, we are all fantastic hypocrites on some level or another. We all think one thing, but then we have a thing. That's just part of who we are. And in dealing with somebody that we may disagree with, is saying if someone's is understanding that someone may not. No one ever has a consistent field of view because the real world doesn't always allow that. So if there is an inconsistency in any of our beliefs or any of our arguments, that doesn't necessarily make somebody a hypocrite, or a low person. Because we all have our blind spots. And then how do we talk about the other side in a non-polarizing way? What to avoid? Using pejorative labels, wingnuts, Bible thumpers, libtards, snowflakes. And some of you have already talked about this tonight in a really good way, using the phrase they all, or the Democrats, or all the Republicans, as lumping everybody into one group. Painting supporters, and I forget, you mentioned this, painting supporters with the same brush you use for the politicians. So there are politicians that I really do not like. There are politicians I'm really struggling with right now. And not necessarily painting someone who may have voted for that politician with the same brush. It's like, I don't like this person, but that doesn't mean that because you supported this person, that means you have all the things that I don't like about this person. Separating that. Like I say, it's like, I don't like you for yourself, not because of you, but no, I'm just kidding. Criticize ideas, not motives. So one way of doing this is denial on climate change is risky because we're running out of time to prevent lasting damage to the planet, versus climate change deniers care more about fossil fuel industry than about the planet. So the first one is trying to make a very urgent plea, but not necessarily critiquing the motives of those who disagree with it. And then the person on the red might say, climate science is uncertain, even though I do not think we should overhaul our way of life, versus climate change supporters have a liberal agenda to over-regulate the economy and tax us to death. There's like two ways of each side making a particular argument. The other thing, and I think this is the thing that I know I have to work on too, I think a lot of us do, we have to criticize our own side too, for our own inconsistencies, whatever that is. And I think that's the one thing I haven't seen as much, is being able to step back and say, when are quote unquote our people, or when am even I getting out of control? Being able to say we are losing that group because we haven't listened to them very well, that's an example. Sometimes our leaders talk as if they have the final answer to a certain issue here, and I don't think they do. Another thing, say something positive about the other side. I read a liberal or conservative commentator who said something interesting about XYZ. I think their criticism has some validity, even if I don't agree with their solution. Try an eavesdropper thought experiment. How would a rational, well-intentioned member of the other group feel when you were listening to you describe their other side? If you were listening to someone describe the other side, would that person feel respected or disrespected? Would they feel understood or grossly misrepresented? And so, depolarizing conversations with like-minded people. It took me a little while to figure out the icon for this. Everyone sharing the same brain. So that was... Apple really doesn't give you a lot of icons in their pages thing, so I really kind of had to make do with what. Listen, acknowledge, pivot, perspective, and those are all on your sheets. Listen. If you're in a situation where the other person's getting worked up and being very polarizing, listen for the other's values and emotions behind the stereotyping, ridicule, or contempt. Because usually when there's strong emotions, there's usually a deeper story there. It's often from frustration, fear, worry for the country, or worry about groups in the country, or for groups in the country. Personal experiences of being put down by people on the other side. Acknowledge what you're hearing. It's kind of what you were saying, Patty. I'm listening to what the other person is saying and share your own worries and concerns. I'm sorry you've had to deal with those put downs. I'm sorry, and I hear you and I'm with you about your concerns about whatever the issue might be. Pivot. Signal a shift in your part of the conversation. Offer a context for why introducing another perspective. And just to kind of offer, I'm sorry that you've got to deal with this put downs in your family. I hear you, I'm sorry, I may have missed this wrong. I think it's the last one. I'm with you on being very concerned about what's going on. Can I throw in a different perspective? Just to sometimes if someone's really worked up about something, sometimes the energy needs to be moved away. You can still stay on the same topic, but just move it away from that conflict. And then having perspective and offering a depolarizing viewpoint. I've been learning that not everybody on the other side thinks that way. I see more complexity in why some people oppose that idea. It's not just because they're uninformed. It's easy for me to judge them for supporting X, but I'm aware that I've not been in their shoes. I don't agree with them on this, but our side has ignored this problem for too long. They put us down and we put them down, and nothing's working. We have to understand and respect each other more if we're going to solve our country's problems. Whenever we're depolarizing, here's the thing. It's fun to be polarizing. It's one of the reasons why we do it. It's fun to make a smart alecky comment. I have fun making smart alecky comments. And sometimes that's been one of the frustrations of starting to get into this work is I really started sitting on some really amazing one-liners that I could have come up with. I mean, they were just really fantastic. And I may have to write them down for when I'm in a less generous mood or something. But expect pushback, because a lot of times, if we're like with a bunch of people who are kind of like, if we're around a bunch of Republicans or if we're around Democrats and they're all kind of used to us being part of the gang and just kind of going along with it, we may have to go through these skills over and over again and say, yeah, we're still part of the group, but I don't want to engage in certain kinds of polarizing behavior. I don't just want to shove other people off to the side. And here are some final thoughts. Being a depolarizer is not just being high-minded, it's being pragmatic about the future. We have had a lot of differences in our country. Some of the arguments we've been having in this country, we've been having since 1776. Should we have a big government, or should we have a big government or a small government? Jefferson and Hamilton were arguing about that. Should we have lots of taxes or no taxes? We have been arguing about this for ages. But the problem is when we get so worked up in the one way this needs to work, it almost always comes around. It flips around. And so someone's on top, and then the other side tries to take charge, and then they want to ram their stuff in. And then there's a pushback, and then they want to ram their stuff in. Neither side is going to vanquish the other side, so we better figure out how to get along so we can run the country together. Depolarizing influence apt to occur over time. If you come across as genuine and use your skills, people will remember what you said and think about it. As I always say, if you can fake sincerity, you are A-okay in life. All right, thanks. That was also a joke for internet land, so. Long-term goal. What's a long-term goal? Explain the side that you disagree with. Lawyers have to do this. If lawyers are going into a courtroom, they have to have their own argument, and they have to have the other argument that's going to be coming at them. So try to explain the other side perspective in a way where someone would say, yeah, you understand where I'm coming from, you got it. And it requires reading, listening, and suspending disbelief to understand another worldview. And then practice identifying with the opposing side. And we all kind of, it's funny, no one's all left or all right. No one is, I mean, maybe a couple of people, but there's always somebody who it's like, I'm really liberal on this, but these two things, or I'm really conservative on this, but on these three issues, who is a big proponent of marriage equality, for gay marriage? Dick Cheney. Hyper-conservative Dick Cheney. I'm not saying whether you agree with that or not, but it's like that's an example. There's always some mix. There's always some mix. So identify your inner conservative side or your liberal or your inner liberal side if you're a conservative. Lesson, the other resides in me as a part of what I value about myself. And of course, in coming across our divides and coming across our, in trying to build a more perfect union and in trying to do our part to further God's kingdom of earth, we need grace. This is not work we can do on our own. We can't. We need God's grace. Peter explained before the Council of Jerusalem, I had a vision, something resembling a large sheet, lowered from the sky by its four corners. I also heard a voice say to me, what God has made clean, you are not to call profane. God helped Peter work through the big question of the day. And Paul, the original troll, on his journey as he was nearing Damascus, a light from the sky suddenly flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Grace came in and helped untie the knots and helped break the ties. And so one more quote from Arthur Brooks, and he talks about polarization, America, and Catholicism.
The United States is fundamentally a country of religion. I look at any group of talk, I look at it, I say, you're Catholics like me, 3 generations of expression, things we're running away from some, terrible situation in Sicily, or people who are trying to escape from Iran in Central Europe, or people who run from the country in terror, their ancestors were. But they have in common that we're ambitious riffraff. We're taking the church, which in many countries is perceived as the church of the empire. In the United States, it's the church of the outside. It's the church of the immigrant. Why are there so many hospitals, and so many hospitals, so many universities? Because they wouldn't let us into the ones that were here. That's why we had to build our own. That's the whole point. And who did we invite in? The future saint during the day, case for canonization, became a Catholic when she saw a woman of means, a rich lady, at Mass, on her knees next to her neighbor. That's the essence of what it actually means to be Catholic, what that means to be an American. Look, this is the nation of bridgers. This is the faith of bridgers. We're going to live it or not. It's a patriotic thing to do. It's a Catholic thing to do. But it's hard.
All right. Thank you all for coming today. Oh, and Claire, if you wish to enter into this more fully, we are going to have at St. Paul's a small group opportunity for this Advent season, and it's called And a Little Child Shall Lead Them, Bridging the Divisions Between Us. And so, Claire, did you want to come up and just talk about it really quick, or? I'll tell you, Claire, why don't you use the microphone so you can...
Thanks. This Advent, the 4 weeks of Advent, we're having small groups, and I have, and you can sign up for different ones. Some are on Zoom, some are live in person, and all of them are going to be taking this concept of polarization and kind of trying to do bridge building. So if you're interested in this conversation, if you can get into a small group, you will have a further opportunity to kind of explore this area. Thank you.
And there's snacks in the back, so let's just hang out and enjoy each other's company. Yes, John, you have a question? Yeah, what's your comment? Yep. Yeah, yeah. Wow. So that was so just for those at home, the long loneliness was David Brooks, not Arthur Brooks, but David Brooks' book that he heard on a podcast. But that the only cure for that is love, and I think that's a great reminder for all of us as we enter this holiday season. The Christmas trees are up. It's not even Advent yet, but the Christmas trees are up. So we'll have a blessed. Thank you for coming in online. Thanks for joining us all today. All right, God bless.
We're talking.